Hey everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan, and today I'm going to show you exactly how to change the rear brake pads and rotors for a 2020 Toyota 4Runner. Now this is for the rear brakes. The front brakes are in their own separate video. Now this was done on a 4Runner, but I imagine the Tacoma of the same sort of year set is probably very similar, if not exactly the same, because Toyota's cool like that. With all out of the way, let's jump into it.
So what we're going to do next is just grab a flat-bladed screwdriver and stick it right in here and kind of use a leverage point. I'm not going to do that right this second because I'm going to put a nice microfiber around that screwdriver to not mar the wheel. So holding on to the hub, and you have your nice terry cloth protecting the rim because you don't want to mar it, this will kind of like pop off, exposing our entire wheel, and now we can get our lug nuts loose. So now, in no particular order, we're going to grab a 21mm socket to break these lug nuts loose with a nice long breaker bar. There we go, and now we can jack the vehicle into the air so we can take the wheel off and get to the brakes. So now we can remove our lug nuts the rest of the way and just brace the wheel to make sure it doesn't fall on you. Now that the vehicle's up in the air, it is really easy to do. So go ahead and lift with your knees, not your back. So next we can remove the caliper with a 17mm socket. I'm just going to break these loose because usually they're pretty snug. There we go. And these are actually special slide bolts, so once they've cleared thread, you can just remove them just like this and set them aside. And keep a hand on the caliper, because once you remove this bottom one, it can fall off. So we can go ahead and just pull that straight up and out, and you can just kind of set it up and in such a way that it won't fall or hang by the brake line. So then we're going to take a 17mm socket so we can break these loose, these bolts that hold the caliper to the truck. And they're on pretty good, so maybe a breaker bar is in order. And then definitely hold on to the bracket as you take the bolt out because it will fall off. Technically the rotor can fall off too, but these rotors are pretty stuck on, so I'm not too worried about it, but it's something to keep in mind. You remove the bracket, just pull it straight up and out. So these rotors are pretty cool because they have threaded holes in them for an 8mm by 125. Link down below in the description to these exact bolts I'm using. Any hardware store would have them, truthfully. They are pretty handy in pulling the rotor off because they can get really stuck. Now see, that's already coming off like butter. So with the flange broken loose, basically the rust holding the rotor to our axle, we should be able to just kind of maneuver it out. And there's our end result. So the next thing we're going to do is retract this piston into the caliper, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to grab one of the old pads that we don't care about and just set it in there. It's going to act as a buffer medium between it and our tool, which is this right here, and it's a piston retraction tool made specially for this job. These are very inexpensive and very handy. I definitely recommend buying one. If you don't want to use that, you can just use a pair of channel locks, or a C-clamp works too. But this makes this job absolute cake. So you just tighten this clamp effectively, and you just go slow because you're just forcing that brake fluid back up into the master. It's okay. It's meant to do that. We're not opening the system or anything. And the pad is protecting the piston from the tool very well. And just keep going. It doesn't take a lot of force or anything. This isn't like crazy hard to do until the tool stops, and you'll feel it. Keep going, almost there. There you go, and that's it. You don't like sit here and go and try to muscle it more. It will just stop, and then you're done. And you can tell you're done because the piston will be completely flush with the caliper housing. So before we put the rotor on, let's go ahead and get a wire brush and just clean this surface off because we want the rotor to sit flush on this flange surface. I'm not gonna make you watch me do the whole thing. With our flange surface nice and clean, we can grab our nice and clean rotor. Sometimes rotors come with like an oil on them that you really need to clean off beforehand with some carburetor spray or some sort of solvent before you install your rotor. Oh yeah, look at that, $1 million. And here's a pro tip. I always put a lug on just to make sure the rotor can't fall off. And sometimes I'll put two like this and just tighten them down finger tight on the X here. That way That way I know the thing is square on the flange and isn't like at a weird angle, making it more difficult to get the caliper on. So here's our caliper bracket mounting assembly. I've already taken one pad out to use in the previous scene. So the way you remove these is you just push them inboard and it kind of falls out. And I don't really care about those, so that can go in the trash. And then we need to remove these clips that are inside of here as well, and they're really easy. You just pry them out. Just like that. And then the new one goes in exactly how that one came out. It's always easier to kind of hook it on the inboard side. No, it's not for that side. They are side specific, so if it doesn't work, try a different one. This one will work. So you kind of hook it on the back and then push it down like this. And then just go ahead and replace all of our metal brackets included in our kit. These do have to be new, but they don't need to be lubricated. With our new retainer clips installed, we can load up our caliper bracket mounting assembly with brake pads. So just take your new Bosch brake pads, links down below in the description, and just put them in how they would be on the truck. And you load them from the inside out. And they can be a little fiddly, so just keep at it. There we go. And then load them as outboard as possible, up this way, so that way it's easier to slide on the rotor. And do that for both sides of the equation. These don't have a wear indicator or anything, so you don't need to worry about that. Just if it fits and it's going the right direction, you've got it right. Sometimes you need to kind of manipulate the clips a little bit. And then don't go too far because it can actually fall at the back. So if you want it to look like just like this, that is really nice, and it can go back on the truck. So we can replace our caliper mounting bracket, being careful not to disturb our pads. Sometimes it takes a little bit of fishing. And these are our 17 millimeters. And then we're gonna grab our torque wrench and tighten these to 74 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, that's completely understandable. And somewhere between 1 arm tight and 2 arm tight, I think is sufficient. I'm trying to break up the torquing evenly as I can. There we go. And there we are. So now we can grab our brake caliper and maneuver it in such a way that it goes back on our brake pads and rotor. And before that can happen, we need to squeeze our brake pads as tight as they'll go, just like this. And then we can swing our caliper on. Now you don't want the little black accordion pieces to kind of fold in on themselves. You want them to be nice and lined up so the slide bolts can go through there, and it's easy to get them folded up in a way that's not correct. So just use your fingers like that and flick them into place. That's really good. And then I have one of the slide bolts from earlier. I've already cleaned and re-lubricated with the lubrication that came in our kit. That's looking really nice. So now that these are down just finger tight, I can go ahead and try to torque them. Our torque spec is 65 foot-pounds. I'd probably call it like 1 arm tight if you don't have a torque wrench, totally understandable. But I'm just gonna try it again to break up the torquing so you're not just doing everything all at once. There we go. And there you go. Now that the passenger side is complete, we can move over to the driver's side. Never try to do them at the same time. You can actually pop the piston out of the caliper, so it's always essential to do one side at a time. You can pop the piston out the other side of the caliper if there's nothing in the way to stop it. So please just do one side at a time. And of course, the driver's side is exactly the same as the passenger side, just on a mirror. Now we can lift with our knees and put our wheel back on. There we go. And these lug nuts are really interesting because they have a shoulder and a shank. So they only go on, they don't like self-align. You have to align the wheel along with it and look inside of there to make sure the shank is going into the rim. Because that's the only way it's going to bolt down and locate, because if you get this wrong, the wheel will fly off at speed. So you have to make sure that the shank is in there, just like that one is. Excellent. Then I'm going to take my 21 millimeter socket on my impact implement, and I'm just going to run them down in a cross pattern. And always do a cross pattern when you're doing anything with a wheel for safety. And there we go. We can put it on the ground and torque the lug nuts to their specification. All right, so now we're ready to torque our wheels down. Now, if you have an aluminum wheel, the torque specification is 76 foot-pounds. If you have a steel wheel, your torque specification is 83, so a little bit higher. So I've set my torque wrench to that 76 figure because these are aluminum. 21 millimeter socket, and we're just gonna tighten them in a star pattern. So we're always gonna go across. Always move across when you're tightening down lug nuts. That's very good. And I always double check them because this is obviously really important. You don't want these wheels just flying off. So I always double check them. It only takes you another 30 seconds and it really gives you that peace of mind. And then we can put our little hubcaps on. It doesn't matter which way as long as the cutouts match up the bolts. Just give it a couple little taps with the palm of your hand or the side of your hand like I just did until you hear that sound. And there you go. So now I'm in the driver's seat, and what we're gonna do after all of our brake job is complete is we're gonna come over here to the brake pedal and slowly depress it down to the end of its travel. Go as slow as you possibly can because you don't want any air getting in through seals or a different way that it's not really designed to do. Because what you're doing is taking up the space between the rotor and the brake pads because we introduced space. So just go as slow as you can. Slower the better. Until we're at the end of its travel. Now let it come back up equally as slowly. You just want to go nice and slow. And you're going to do this like probably 6 times, would be my guess. Kind of depends on how much brakes you did today. Usually on the 4th or 5th or 6th, it'll get firmer. And you'll know you're done because the pedal will get super firm. Like it actually should feel like a regular brake pedal. So just keep going and go slow. There we go. That feels like a nice firm pedal. One more time. Yeah. Okay, now it feels like a regular brake pedal, so this car is all ready to go and brake in the brakes. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to do that.
Now your job's not done just yet. You have to brake in your brakes. And what I mean by that is you have a perfectly machined surface on the rotor and a new surface on the pads. And those have to be basically introduced to each other or else they will glaze over and you'll have no brakes at all, essentially, or very, very diminished braking capacity, which is sort of the opposite of what you want. So what you're gonna do is go around your neighborhood very slowly, maybe like 10 miles an hour, and you're just going to touch the brakes together, just a little bit, and let it go. And touch the brakes together a little bit and let it go. And what that's gonna do is the dust that gets created from introducing those surfaces together sort of gets discarded instead of bound up on a heavy brake surface. That would clog up the brake and creates a sort of glaze that will prevent the brake from working. So you need to do that sort of get the brakes to touch procedure maybe like 6 or 7 times before you just go out and take off to the freeway. So make sure you brake in your brakes properly. And that's it. That's how to do the rear brakes on a 2020 Toyota 4Runner. It is absurdly easy and simple. I think the dealer wanted something like $500 just to do the rear brakes. This was not $500 worth of work, as you just saw. The rotors and pads are fairly inexpensive, and again, I've left those links down below in the description for your convenience. Thank you so very much for watching. If you found this content interesting, helpful, or useful, consider leaving a like and subscribing, or going the extra mile and becoming a member down below. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.